Welcome everyone to our next Rebels with a Heart. We're excited to have you here today. We're going to be talking about the evolution of the hospitality industry. We have some amazing experts and thought leaders here for you. I'm so happy to be with you all, and to our guests, thank you for each of you joining us. It's going to be an active, action-packed conversation. So first off, I will welcome Nora Tobin. Thank you for coming on Rebels today. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Derek. Hello, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. I'm Nora Tobin. I have been working in the hospitality and wellness space for the last 9 years. I've partnered with Marriott International's luxury brands, as well as the Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection. And I'm an executive coach and integrative nutrition specialist to a number of companies across financial services, technology, and hospitality. And I'm the CEO of Nora's Naturals Coffee Company.
And it's great coffee. So thanks, Nora, for joining us. We'll come back in just a moment. Bill Norman, welcome to Rebels with a Heart.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Derek. Thank you for the invitation today. I too have been in hospitality for a little while. I'm a little closer to 30 years at this point, with kind of an early phase with DoubleTree Hotels and its original format, working with some great people like Ann Rhodes, who I know is a Rebels fan. Made some moves there to some really landmark properties. Spent some time at the Arizona Biltmore, a little bit later at the Homestead Resort, the oldest resort in the country. And most recently, I was Chief HR Officer at Canyon Ranch, so the original wellness destination in the world, through last year, and then decided to take a off-ramp, I suppose, as they relocated their focus to Texas for their headquarters. So now doing a little bit of work on the side and some projects and exploring what might be next. So good to meet everybody and glad to be with you this morning.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. And Arte Nathan, going over to you, sir.
My name's Arte Nathan. I hate to admit this, but I've been in hospitality for 40 years. Jeez, you never want to have to talk numbers like this. But anyway, I started as a young man in the gaming business, and I was lucky to get in on the ground floor of the Golden Nugget Corporation and watch it grow from Golden Nugget to Mirage to Wynn Resorts and spread itself all over the world. I opened hotels, China, Mississippi, Atlantic City, in Las Vegas, hired over 125,000 people. And as Phil and Nora will tell you, that's relatively easy, or at least it used to be relatively easy. But my job was to keep them. And in the hospitality business, and all the people on this call probably know this, turnover is terrible, and we hire a lot of people because so many people just turn over and leave. And so my job, when I started, they said, look, you got to stop the turnover. So I got turnover down to 8% for over 22 years. And I retired in 2006, started a consulting company called Strategic Development Worldwide. And we have recently spawned a new online training company called Tiny Classroom Training. And I got to tell you, I'm thrilled to be here because hospitality is in our blood.
Yes.
And, being able to talk about it with pros like the people I'm here with today this is exciting. So I hope you guys enjoy this.
We're thrilled to have you here, Arte. So we'll jump into the questions in just a moment. But again, for the audience, I'm Derek Lundsten, CEO of LifeGuides and host of Rebels with a Heart. LifeGuides is a platform that connects people who have been through a life event, life experience, or life challenge for mentorship for those people who are going through that same or a similar experience. And we offer that to companies to provide for their people and their families, which, as we all agree, the last couple of years has been a time where connection, support, wisdom, and resources are needed more than ever. So with that, we're going to jump into our conversation. Arte, you mentioned a really important theme, I think. We hear right now a lot about the Great Resignation, the Great Reset, the Great Reactivation, whatever you want to call it, the talent shortage that we're seeing. And it seems that the hospitality industry, particularly restaurants, hotels, fitness, that industry is particularly being affected by that. What is that about? Why is that? How do we change that now? I mean, you have a lot of lessons from what we've done, but how are you changing it now in the new rules, the new model, and where we're going forward? I know each of you has a perspective on this. So, and any of you can take this question. So,
well, it's interesting because the hospitality business, it's a service business. It's people to people. Yes. And so we just assume that the business itself, knows how to deal with people, deal with employees. And the fact of the matter is, look, the three of us know about this, and we've practiced servant leadership and emotional intelligence and all of the things that connect companies to their employees. But the vast majority of our industry does not do that. And it's a simple thing to learn, but it's a mindset. And so you have to go there. And if employees feel comfortable, and I think this Great Resignation, this Great Reset is all about people feeling comfortable. They went through the pandemic and they were left isolated. And what were their connections? And their connections, if they were weak, then they're not going back to a weak connection at their previous company. They're going to look for a better connection. And I think we, the HR team and the hospitality leadership, have to adapt to these changing times. And unless we make those connections, we're just not going to be successful. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm sorry, Nora, go ahead. I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
I was just going to reflect on the same kinds of things. I think this is all about flexibility now, right? It's about, the rules haven't changed. We were talking about that a little bit earlier, so much as how we do it, how we talk about it, how we communicate them has. I think a lot of employees who did make a change last year, who were part of the Great Resignation, are getting ready to do it again in some cases. There's an article this morning that Sharon published saying, the data is a little bit difficult to pinpoint now, but as many as 20% of the people who left last year are getting ready to do it again because they didn't find what they thought they were going to find.
Great regret, they're saying, is what it's called.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So let's get ready, right? This is it's about flexibility, and it's here to stay, at least for a while. But I think it's about respect. I think it's about compensation. It's about benefits and making those personal and making them actionable. Scheduling. There's just a whole litany of things where, to your point, hospitality has been very sort of stubborn to be flexible over the years, where we would, post a job that required, you to be available 7 days a week, 8 hours a day or whatever it was. That just doesn't work for people anymore. And it didn't work then so well. Now they're willing to take action on it to find some place that they can get the balance that's looking for. So I'll pause there. Nora, what was your thought?
I completely agree. I think I look at it too in terms of the traveler is very similar to business professional, where it's these ways of meeting them where they're at, whether it's in transition, whether it's on a hotel or within an office, or now, working from home, where to make them, to help shift their state or shift their physiology to give them that feeling of well-being that then allows them to communicate and connect and improve work or travel or, again, wherever they're at in their journey. So I think now, just seeing companies, it's so inspiring, seeing companies change the environment of the offices, where it used to be, they're coming in, everybody's knocking out their work and leaving. Now I've seen companies invest in community spaces, places for entertainment, bringing in bands, having just more of a sense of community. Because I think after the time we've had being so isolated, it's changing their state from a personal standpoint, but then also putting in play ways to connect and in ways we just didn't before. So I think it's actually an exciting time to just reevaluate and change the environment, both in corporations and in hospitality.
Well,
this was coming anyways. As the generations start to turn over, we're baby boomers or Gen Xers, and I think that the millennials and the Gen Z kids, and managers complain that I just don't know how to manage these kids. These kids are looking for connections. They're looking for people to know who they are. They're looking for a value system that matches theirs. And companies have the ability to do that in their cultures, in their presentation, in their communications to people. And yet they don't think it's worth it. I mean, how many of the people on this call or people in hospitality in general know every employee's name, first name, and know their families and their birthdays and their anniversaries and their kids, where they are? I mean, you want to make a connection, you have to make a connection. You can't go halfway there. It just doesn't work. And that's what these kids are looking for. And Phil was right. If 20% left last year, or 20% of the people, they're just going to keep going until they find it.
Right.
And unless you change your mindset, unless you say, I'm going to make them connected to the organization, not the other way around.
No.
Then it ain't going to work.
Well, I think that is the opportunity to that point, because that was kind of my question, is like, where are these people going? Let alone their great reset or resignation. We hear about the talent shortage right now is the word in hotels, in restaurants. They can't find people. So my question is, what are those people, or the next generation, so to speak, choosing to do instead of work for these companies?
And find other ones.
Yeah, exactly.
They find other ones that match. Now, just go down the street. I lived in Brooklyn for a while, and there's help wanted signs in 3 out of 5 restaurants.
Yep.
So I go into the 2 that there's no help wanted signs, and I say, what's going on here? They're fully staffed. They're overstaffed. People are happy. And I, well, how do you do that? Well, look, I'm on a first name basis with them. They can call me at home. They know if they have a problem. And Phil mentioned it. It's flexibility.
Yes.
That's what these people want. And they want to know that you care about me, not that you care about me as an employee, as an employee number. And so there are lots of companies today that are fully staffed. There's a lot of people that are happy, but they're not in the news.
Yes.
They're not talking about
Exactly.
the great satisfied group or the companies that are fat and sassy. No, they just stay to themselves and they're doing fine. So if you're wondering why you're not connecting with your team or having a team, just go to the guy who's fully staffed and ask him, what are you doing?
I may have been leading the question a bit, so thank you for answering it so clearly and so purposefully and vehemently, Arte, because that is the exact answer that I was looking for. Is that that's a myth that the people are there, they're looking and they're working and they're choosing to be with values-based people who walk the talk, cultures and leaders and connections in those communities. So I think that's spot on, and I think that's the invitation, to your point, Nora, opportunity for us as leaders and companies to step up and do it better and do it differently. And to your point, Phil, there's and any of you can comment on this. There's elements to bring forward, right? There's certain key values, certain key lessons, certain key work ethics that need to be brought forward and taught to those people, and make sure that they're a part of it. And we iterate and we take it to another future level, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? Any of you? Yeah.
Well, how many people? Every company has mission, vision, and values. Where do they put those?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, most of them think they do anyways. They're on the shelf someplace. But where are their values? Are they woven into everything? When you post a job, you post the tasks that the people are supposed to do in that job, rather than the values you want people to have or enjoy in that job. You got to, like I said, it's a mindset here. You got to just shift your thinking to something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's exactly right. I remember, you're making me kind of laugh inside as I hear you talk. I remember at the time at Canyon Ranch, we changed everybody's job description to include one more essential function, and it was the ability to give hugs. And it was just trying to illustrate that, when you pass somebody on the path, you may not literally hug them, but it was about looking out for each other and making sure that we didn't lose track in the whirlwind of the day, whatever that was for you, to look out for each other, just to kind of pause and check on how things are doing and how that kid that wasn't feeling good is doing, or, whatever. And it makes all the difference. So I think those are the winners that are out there now, already to your point. Mm-hmm. I also, one other thing I saw just this past weekend here in Tucson, there, we know we're competing with a broader, at least in the broader sense of hospitality, think entry-level positions. Fast food and some of those other industries have been a close cousin. I happen to see a sign out front of a brand new fast food restaurant with golden arches that just opened sometime in the last couple of weeks here in Tucson. And it had a sign that at first glance, I thought it said there was a $500 bonus for hiring, because they have several hiring sort of signs. What they're offering is a $500 bonus to apply. So I thought, oh my, it's really at that level. This is worse some other places. So anyway, I think you're right.
We'll
see all that.
We'll come back to that, Phil. Go ahead, Nora.
Yeah, no, and I was just actually going to comment too on the idea of giving that sense of how you feel in an organization versus, and that connection of bringing everybody together in the beginning and making everybody feel good right off the bat in a day. And it just reminded me of that, what you had mentioned, Phil, about Canyon Ranch and just connecting in that way and actually being intentional about that time. It reminds me of the Ritz-Carlton. And I know, I believe they still do this, but they did their lineup where in the beginning of the day, they brought all teams across the property into a specific meeting room. And every day they would go over the tasks and objectives for the day, but it would be a chance for those who work at the front desk, to those who work in housekeeping, to the executive team to come together and just simply connect. And I think in a hospitality environment that you don't really get in a day, no matter what, because everybody's moving from one thing to the next. And it's obviously very busy. So I do think there's that opportunity that seems minor if it's 5 minutes within a company or within a hospitality group to come together, maybe do a couple deep breaths, sharing one inspirational story, or, anything positive that connects everybody, but doesn't have to be for 30 minutes or an hour, because that's obviously not really very reasonable. But I think that's an interesting way to bring teams together.
Yeah.
So again, when I talk about a mindset, and something Nora just mentioned, keyed this off. There are certain skills that leaders have to have today. And unless they're focused on this, they're going to miss this boat completely. I think one of the, and I mentioned servant leadership and emotional intelligence, and those are big topics. But how do you bring those to life? And two things I would recommend. I think managers today have to catch people doing things right.
Yes.
We all like to be McGruff the crime dog and shoot people when they're wrong. Realistically, if you spend your day catching people doing things right, that's a mindset, and that's how they're going to think about the organization. That kind of reflects the golden rule to treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
And not many people have that in their handbook, but they should. And the last thing I'd like to suggest is that managers should be trained to be coaches. We train them on the rules, on the policies and procedures, on the corrective behavior policy, and we train them to be cops, but we don't train them to be coaches. And that's what, and again, I think the people working today are reacting to the fact that somebody's concerned about me and really wants to help me to be better. And now that's an organization, that's a value system that I think I'd like, and I'll stick around here. But I think companies got it wrong. I don't think that they're focused on the right things. And I think that their managers just fall in line with the wrong mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nora.
I was just I think it's such a great point. And there's could be something that managers instill in their day where it's just sending one positive email to somebody about what they've done recently. That's, just, it could be minor, it could be major, but I speak to my brother about this quite a bit because he leads many more teams than I do, and within a company structure. And he says, by the end of the day, sometimes I feel like I've been inundated with emails and tasks that you don't even, your team's doing well, but you don't feel like you have a second to explain that to them. So maybe again, just a minor goal of just one note to somebody a day could be helpful.
Yeah, I that's such a big topic, and I think we spend a lot of years trying to figure out recognition and rewards, and it's become far more sort of personalized and individualized over the years. And there's some technology out there, some really cool ideas happening in companies. But from my experience, I think that there's never been anything more powerful than just approaching somebody, looking them in the eye and letting them know that they were appreciated, or whatever that was. Now, the last couple of years, we haven't literally been able to do that quite as easily, but we could use technology just like most of us are using right now, and still have the same sort of impact. So I think that, combined with the thought, I think Stephen Covey gets credit for the concept of land one at a time when you've got too much to do. Trying to do, and this certainly applies to recruiting and a lot of the talent sort of conversations that everybody's wrestling with these days, but you're not going to get many done well, maybe none of them done well if you do too many of those. Nobody has enough resources right now, at least in the HR space. Everybody's tired. There's sort of that whole list of reasons why this is challenging. But the fact is, at the end of the day, if you choose to land one at a time and make 5 minutes for what you're talking about, Nora, I think it'll make a big difference, at least to that person that you're approaching. So anyway, I think you just have to figure that out and find the 5 minutes.
So companies that are struggling to find employees should just look in the mirror and say, do I say hello to every employee every day?
Yep.
Do I say goodbye at the end of the day and thank you? And do I close the deal by saying, I can't wait to see you back here tomorrow? All right. That's simple. And Phil's right. We're stressed and we're stretched, but it's these little things that these millennials and Gen Xers are looking for that sort of give them an insight into what this company and what these people are thinking about. And that it's got to show in their actions.
So to that point, there's a question in the audience, which is along this point of the one by one. How do you scale individualized acknowledgement incentivization? Yes, that requires each person to do it, but how do you, is it a training? Is it a culture? Like, how do you scale that in your experience, Artie, that level of?
Well, look, I worked in companies, my hotels had 10,000 employees, each one. And it was a big city. And I was known as the mayor of the city, and mayors walk around and they talk to people. And so if you walk down the hall at a hotel and everybody you pass, you make eye contact to and you say, hey, how you doing today? If you got any problems, come see me. You can see 100 people an hour.
Right.
Now, if you want to stop and get a little deeper with some of them, you can. If they want to get deeper with you, they will. But it's that eye contact. It's seeing managers. And years ago, and I'm old enough to remember management by walking around it.
I was
It
going
was
to
a
say
great
that.
idea.
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, I would spend 4 hours a day out of my office.
Right.
So I think the general managers in restaurants and hotels or HR people ought to give up their offices for 4 or 5 hours a day
Yeah.
and just walk around. That, I think that's how you scale it. And then relationships build off of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And Derek, back to your question. I mean, I don't think it's about training or policies or any of those kinds of things. I think it's about the culture being so inherently immersed in that when you walk by as a leader and don't say hi, that's the problem, and that's noticeable. That's sort of the bullseye for the whole effort. So it's got to happen all the time. Got to make time for it.
Yeah. Well, to that, go ahead, Nora. You want to say something on this topic? Right.
Oh, go ahead.
Let's say, so on this same topic, when we talk about walking around and connecting with people, the last couple of years in particular have been particularly trying on people for a lot of reasons, obviously, let alone what's happened just psychologically, mentally well-being, their families. One of our rebels, actually, our rebel of the year, Tom Frank, who was one of the founders of P.F. Chang's, I don't know if Phil, him, he was on a couple of years ago on this exact segment. And he talked about this scenario that in the olden days of hospitality, the mantra was leave your problems at the door. You show up to work, you're at work, right? And that's just the way it was. And he didn't aspire to that at all. He did the complete opposite, which was how do you address the entire employee? How do you address their family? How do you address their well-being needs? That has obviously happened in a huge way now. The idea that you can even suggest that old philosophy has gone away. How do you scale not just their performance and acknowledgement at work, but their acknowledgement and the situation of what's happening outside of work, particularly when you talked about, Phil, essential workers. Hospitality in particular has been going to a physical space for the last couple of years when so many people and their patrons have not been traveling, have not been home, have not been coming to see them in those places. And that's been a particularly challenging time. There's a lot in that question. So feel free to tackle that in whatever way feels appropriate for you. So any of you, yeah.
These are simple topics. Look, I used to ask my managers, think of a manager who you worked for in the past who you thought was a jerk. Now, write down the things that made him a jerk and make a commitment never to do those things again. All right. And that'll be your guide. Or change your handbook to just have the golden rule. Treat others and their things the way you want people to treat you and your things. All right. Make it simple for people. And they'll overachieve in these things. But this is not rocket science. And I think we're trying to succumb to the people who say it might be rocket science. This is connecting to people. And if the three of us don't know how to do this, we're in trouble. But our job is to convey this idea to others. Make those connections, make those eye contact, make the time for people. The things that we're talking about are so important.
I think that it's such a good point too on time, because it's been a strange, it's obviously for many reasons, it's a strange sense of time where I think many who have been working from home, I think all of us have felt to an extent like we're working even more hours than we probably would be by going to office, just because we're not stopping to say hello to someone on, walking to get water or going to get a coffee, and in that transition time. And I think part of what companies can do, and I've seen it to an extent in hospitality, is to create hospitality within the internal teams, is to create new senses of time for everyone that is protected time. Because whether working from home or now coming back to the office, either way, there's just, I think time becomes not your own, and it becomes, whatever the task is at hand. And I don't think we feel like we have enough time to connect. And to your point, Arte, I think, having that connection, personal connection, is what drives all of us. It's just human nature. And for companies to put in, specific times of day, whether it's a 5-minute break or, if it's maybe Friday afternoons, it's a different type of work, maybe it's more creative work, but new ways of protecting that time, maybe with each other, could be a really helpful way to just kind of change where we've been in the sense of going from one thing to the next, or one phone call or one email to the next.
Yeah, I hear some of that same conversation a lot the last few months, where especially if you're working remote or working from home, even if that's by choice, your calendar tends to fill up with 6 or 7 hours of back to back to back, calls or meetings using technology. And I think part of it becomes not just time, but it's a matter of priorities, right? And really protecting what's most important to you, which may be what we're talking about, that phone call needs to be that one employee who you just need to follow up with and check in on, or see how they're okay, or maybe a few of them. Maybe you do that while you've got your lunch in front of you or something. I don't know. I think everybody's got their way of managing that, but it comes down, I think, just a matter of assessing priorities. And I think, the companies who have the right culture and have invested in that well before pandemic are the ones who came through that more in stride. They're the ones that kept most of their staff who were happy to be back, whether that's in person or on the phone, and couldn't wait to get back to work because they missed their team, compared to the ones who, terminated everybody or whatever the alternative may have been. And they're really kind of perhaps starting over with a broken culture. But I think if you don't figure that out, then you're going to be forgive the gender innotation here, but you're going to be the guy with the $500 for an application sign. It's just a matter of time with so much movement going on, and the maybe introspection that A players / candidates have right now. So,
Right.
Yeah.
And
I think one of the other issues that we're dealing with is that people today, it's not so much about money, although money is part of the factor, but it's about flexibility. And flexibility is a bad word to most companies because they want structure, they want schedules, they want, people to be by the book. And I don't know how we adjust from where we've been in our careers to a flexible mindset of maybe we don't have scheduled, maybe people schedule themselves.
Right.
There are companies that are doing that today, that have an Uber type app where people just, get online and I'm going to work today. Meanwhile, the manager wants to know, no, I'm telling you who's going to work today. I just think that flexibility, and it's the new big F word, and we're going to have to figure it out and adapt to.
I think you're right. I mean, there's some cool technology out or kind of in the works of coming out where you would take your usual schedule in a hospitality setting, a roster for housekeepers for the weekend. Instead of putting that schedule on the wall where the manager filled in all the boxes with names, it goes onto a piece of technology, and the staff pick the shifts that work for them around their kids, around their clubs, around their volunteering, whatever. And it has that inherent life balance until it's full. It's a little more sophisticated than that, but I think it's brilliant. I think if we can bring that kind of thing into hospitality where we were so rigid because it was easier and faster in the old days, I think that's just a major advantage. And I think your current employees would be a game changer in terms of the value of
Doesn't it work
their
for
commitment to the team.
It works for catering, the A list and the B list picking their jobs and their shifts, and some is by seniority, but that's generally how that works. And if that's good for them, then it's good for dealers, it's good for housekeepers, it's good for food servers and cooks.
Yeah.
And it's just more difficult. And again, it's a shift of your.
It's just a mentality change.
Yeah.
And Arte, I think you had mentioned mindset, and I think for a very long time, at least what I've seen with some of with the coaching clients for the leaders who are leading many people like you have, Arte and Bill, I think the mindset for so long of these leaders has been the more you work, the better the outcome is, and like the identity almost that you have because you're working so many hours. And I always try to remind them that self-care, it sounds silly, but it's just true. It's like self-care is not selfish. And there's this idea that first and foremost to nourish your mind and your body in whatever way that is. I mean, wellness is different for everybody, but to be able to take that, that experience into your work is going to make everything else better. And in a way, I think just being able to shift for companies to have the shift in culture starts with shifting that mindset of work, that many hours of work is going to equate to productivity and success, which of course that is one version of it, but there's also this other version that I think over this last, year and a half, 2 years, people have seen that they can take those breaks or pick up their kids or have that nourishment of themselves first, which is hopefully going to pull through.
Yeah, I'm kind of chuckling inside again. You're reminding me of a conversation not too many years ago with a C-suite group that said, look, we all just came back from I think it was a holiday weekend, like a 3-day weekend on the calendar. That said, you, pointing to the guy at the end of the table, we're going to turn off your phone from now on in these weekends because when you're working, we're all working. because of that constant sort of, ping that happens, and I don't know if that's guilt or whatever that is that we were all learned in the old days, that you're on 24/7 and the longer day wins or something like that. So I think sometimes it's got to be sort of a team commitment, at the same time that you make a personal commitment to find that value. Otherwise, you're gonna draw us right back to the old days. So
That's such a good point, Bill. I think there's so many of us, I've been guilty of this, where I'm on a true vacation and I'm still waking up, eyes half open, checking my emails. And I think it puts this precedent on the teams that says everybody has to be on all the time. And just as it relates back to just your human body, like your body's not supposed to be on all the time. There's a certain amount of performance you will have, but you also have to have that decompression time to have that, just like a professional athlete, like they put in a ton of time for repair and recovery. And I think we should look at that in the same way in business.
Yep.
So I'm watching these questions, Derek. It's interesting. Somebody just asked, well, how do you remember employees' names? And I think those of us in human resources, we all have our tricks. I mean, I associate the person and their facial expressions with a job, and then I end up remembering them. And everybody has their own tricks, but it's amazing. You don't really have to know people's names if you look at them and smile and say hi. All right, and that goes a long way.
The hack. Yeah, go ahead.
I had a boss once that called everybody Bud. Hey, Bud, how you doing? And it sounded personal, But I think it's in the eye contact, it's in the smile, it's in the open expression.
Yeah.
And if you care, it shows. And if you don't care, or if you think this is an imposition, it shows. And again, Nora, you're right. It's the mindset.
And your age, I think too, just taking a second to say hello. I think we're so used to I was just in New York, and it's like, you're running through the streets almost of New York. And when somebody actually just looks up and says hello to you, it's almost shocking. And it's a really wonderful way to just be reminded that sometimes we just need a little bit of connection, and doesn't have to be the pressure of remembering the name or remembering the specific details, but sometimes it's just like you said, smile and say hi.
Yeah, name tags help too,
It's that connection, because if they feel like you care, if they've got a problem, they're going to follow up with you.
Yeah.
And that's really what you're trying to create here, that somebody feels comfortable, they feel trusted, they feel respected, and they'll come forward. You don't have to spend a lot of time with them. You just have to create that thinking in their mind that you care. And it absolutely goes a long way. Derek, I don't want this hour to get away without saying something else.
Sure.
We're talking about how do you keep people, and that's a big deal. And we could, the three of us could talk about this for a day and a half.
Yeah.
How do you, but I think that you gotta change your mindset about recruiting people. Who you're looking for, where are you looking, where are those talent pools? And if you're looking in the same old places, you're going to get the same old people. And if you're fishing where there are no fish, you're not going to eat tonight. So I think there are giant populations. I did a TED talk on this a couple of years ago, alternate recruiting strategies. And the big one they wanted me to talk about was giving people a second chance, ex-cons coming out of jail.
Yes.
Well, I got to tell you, there are 200 people a day getting out of jail in Las Vegas. There are over 10,000 people a day getting out of jail nationwide.
Yes.
You just think about that applicant pool. Now, I know most people say, "Well, I don't want anybody." But the person who has earned the right for a second chance and wants that second chance will not do anything to screw up that second chance if you give it to them. And these become your best employees. And not for nothing, if you've got a restaurant, everybody in jail works in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
They're all cooks. You want cooks? Go to jail. All right. And everybody else. And I've hired over 800 ex-cons, and I love it because these people are dedicated. They will die rather than disappoint you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a particularly relevant topic. So Johnny Taylor, CEO of Sherm, was on Rebels. Michelle Soraka, CEO of the Televerity Foundation, was on Rebels. Both of them are huge advocates of second chances, and we talk about a lot about this. But I think that's a massive opportunity. To your point, is look for the talent in the unique different places. And I think you're exactly right. Artie. I mean, we need, that's the whole point is give people the opportunity, give them a chance to redeem, improve, and give them the resources they need to be successful. To your point, the golden rule is very much present in that relationship. And I think it's a massive opportunity for us to look at employment differently in that and any population at that point, right? So,
Yeah, I think you're both right. I would also add, having had a similar conversation with HR people who are really nervous about that for all the obvious reasons, it's not an all or nothing proposition. If you have a sensitivity to, people who have a history of something violent, then slow up on that group, but focus on somebody who, is coming out of a commitment that's not it doesn't have the same source. I guess I'm struggling with how to describe that, but it's not all or nothing. You don't have to just swing the doors open. You can still find people who fit your organization and share those values and are born to be in hospitality or whatever your business is.
Because we want to hire people who look like us, who have backgrounds like us, who think like us. And that's a mistake.
right.
Our customers are diverse, and our employees should be just as diverse. And they come from all different, when Phil, you probably remember this when we were younger, you can't have a tattoo, can't have a visible tattoo. Well, why not? And I got more tattoos than I show, but I think tattoos are good. And our customers today are not offended by them, nor were they back then. So I think, again, everything we're talking about today is about a mindset. And, they're not, I don't know anything about people in jail. Well, you can find out everything you want to know. There are organizations. I was on the board of one.
Just talk to them. Yeah, just talk to them. Yeah.
So, this organization called Hope for Prisoners.
Yeah.
We train 200 people a week coming out of jail to just think differently and get their values straightened out and getting their objectives. And we have a 95% placement rate and a 2% attrition rate. And there are organizations in every city that are doing this today. It starts with, go to your one stop, your workforce development groups, and they represent unemployed people and veterans and disabled people. And way down the road, right down the hall, the last door, are the second chance people.
Yeah.
We'll talk to them. There's a lot of information about this, but again, it's your mindset.
Yeah.
And I think that's also just another point too on travel. I mean, it's similar but different in terms of what you're sharing, but I think there's also this idea that all cultures and all different backgrounds have very fundamental needs of connection and love and family and all the basics of shelter and food. And I think that, just as Derek, I just thought of this because you said go talk to them. It's like we also have to start getting back out in the world in any capacity, whether it's in our town or domestically or internationally, just to be reminded of how different everyone is, but how very similar we all share these same values and same needs and just this universal connection. So
I think people are yearning for it. I've shared this in a couple of sessions. I mean, whenever I do because I've been out doing meetings now, coffees and lunches. What it used to be hard to get someone to do a 30-minute coffee meeting pre-pandemic, right? Now, if you have a 30-minute coffee meeting, that becomes an hour and a half almost consistently, because people are so yearning for that conversation, that connection that's been pent up, that you have to literally plan a couple hour blocks for what would have been a quick meeting. And it's amazing to me. I mean, it's almost consistent. Every meeting has been that way. It just turns into a very, very long reunion because it's just necessary. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, Nora, because it's particularly relevant, right? This happened this week. The mask mandates in the airlines are literally falling away over the last 48 hours. Even though it's symbolic in many ways, it's shifting. It marks a shift in what's going on in the consciousness around this industry and around travel and around this whole dialogue. And we'll see how it continues to evolve. I guess that's my question. How do you see it evolving now in this industry over the next, call it 3 to 6 months, particularly with the summer around the corner? And what's the opportunity here for the industry broadly to adapt and be prepared for that shift? Because they're going to go from where they were, where they were struggling, to now having a complete opposite, where they're going to be completely overwhelmed and need to adapt to that quickly. So that's a multi-part question, but feel free to take that.
So a couple of my clients brought this up this week because of this shift that you mentioned, Derek. And the real question is, what if some of my employees want to continue wearing masks? Can I allow that? And the answer is absolutely. Again, if you're dealing with
flexibility, with the big F, flexibility. Yeah.
That's right. And so some of your customers are going to wear masks and some are not. Some of your employees will be the same. And I think you've got to address those issues, but you've also got to address the differences in society today are acute. And those differences, we want to tamp them down at work. But I think you have an opportunity to say, like, look, diversity of thinking, I'm sure we got 10 people here. We got 10 very different ideas. Let's talk about them. So we learn from each other and we build on each other's strengths and weaknesses and thoughts and fears. And I think that, again, helps people feel comfortable about this group I'm working with. And, because if I come to work with a mask and somebody who doesn't wear a mask calls me a wimp, you got to avoid that kind of conflict in the workplace. And so I think we as leaders have to foster those conversations and help people to get through this and see that at work, team. Outside, you can be anything you want, but here we're a team, and let's figure out how to do that.
Yeah. I have a question. I'll continue on that. Go ahead, Nora, or you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say on just to comment on the transition back into this workspace and that flexibility of, or just the openness of thought. I think the patience has to be a little higher now than what we've had before, because I think just it's inherent in transitions that transitions are just stressful no matter what, whether it's within travel or going back to work or any type of transition. So I think I don't know how to quite phrase this in what leaders can do in terms of like actual steps to take for patients, but I think it's just a general quality that we can all just be reminded of, is that patience with ourselves and patience with each other, because it's, transitions just require that.
Yeah. To that point, quick spill, there was a question on this topic. I think it's kind of an overlap. It's regard to incentivizing employees or team members. What are your thoughts on offering tangible incentives tied to their health and wellness is one part. And I'll add tied to diversity of thought, patience in the community, all these different pieces that we're talking about. How do you incentivize, to your point, already catching them doing the right things, i.e. being a true team and having that diversity of different ideas and being able to debate that and allow for people to have their individual expression while being part of a collective mission. So
I think it's the culture of the organization, and that culture comes from the top. And you have to talk about what our values are here. And then you start to weave all this together. And it's not one conversation or another. There's a quilt almost of things going on in the workplace. And if we don't try to influence it with our values and live our values, then we lose a big opportunity. Incentivizing people to do the right thing. I don't know, but I think catching people doing things right and saying thank you is a reverse kind of incentive. Mm-hmm. And if the only people we pay attention to are those who are making mistakes and we're disciplining them, then our employees are going to burn the place down to get our attention. So I think that there's a psychology here that's maybe another whole conversation.
Yeah, I agree too, and I worry a lot. You mentioned mindset a couple of times earlier, so it's probably still falls in that category. But HR people spending a lot of time deciding what's our policy around masks, or do we allow somebody to wear a mask if they want? Same conversation about remote work. What if I still want to work remote and some of my colleagues don't? I think that's a little bit of a distraction, and you're going to have to deal with it from a policy decision perspective. But the real question is, are those people performing their jobs? Are they delivering the value that they're paid to do for the organization? And I think maybe the voice of HR in those spaces isn't just the technical parts or the transactional parts. It's about keeping shining a light in that dark corner as those conversations come up among decision makers in the organization, right?
That's an excellent point, Phil. We create job descriptions that are all about the tasks that we want people to do. We don't put anything in those job descriptions about the results that we expect from their efforts. And I think if we start to focus on results rather than tasks, if it's more about outputs than inputs, then I think we can control the conversation around what are the measures we're looking for? What are the things that we value around here? And those are the outputs. Those are the results. And I think organizations have to start thinking about shifting from the old job description to the new one that talks about results.
Yeah.
Boy, we're talking ourselves out here.
Well, I was gonna ask the question along this line. So back to personalization, right? I think this is the big thing we've seen in a lot of conversations. HR pre-pandemic, all about policy, all about systems, all about structure. If anything, and Rose talks about this as well, Phil, the exceptions, right? How do you create an exception where fair is not necessarily equal, right? But you have to allow for personalization at another level. All that has been thrown away, right? So, if anything, the role of human, and I'm not even call it resource, but human enablement, performance results enablement is changed because we need to allow for that individual experience on their needs. I think there's a whole profession that's about to explode as a result of, because it's not just technology. This is what we're doing. It's not just technology. Technology is amazing for tracking those tasks, tracking those behaviors, tracking those metrics, but it still requires people to do the emotional connection, the actual communication, the interpretation, and instilling those values and the mission, and to your point. So how is that going to continue? How is that going to shift now as we bring in new technologies? How do we continue to maintain this focus on individualization, personalization in the context of the inclination to fall back on what's familiar, i.e. policy, standardization, process that we know is being, and there's a role for both. But I think there's a concern that I think we're going to swing too far back and forth one way or the other. That's my perspective on it. But welcome, you're going to thoughts on that.
No question. I think you mentioned Anne, so I'll go ahead and I'm going to get the email from her after we're done. But I can tell you, 25 years ago, if Anne was part of this conversation, she would tell you that, for example, she had a favorite interview question. Maybe it's still her favorite, and this would really be for leadership people. But her question, and it was a deal breaker, was, tell me about a time that you broke the rules. And if you said, I never break the rules, she would wrap it up pretty quick, ask if you had anything that you wanted to follow up on, stand out. It was a pretty short conversation from there on out. So I think it was the early version, or maybe just that point in time version of saying, I need somebody who will break the rules for the right reason, for the right people, for the right priorities. And it gets back to that flexibility and focus that we were talking about earlier. That's still the rule. It's just a matter of how do we negotiate all these other kind of noisy things happening right now and do that.
Well, I think that there's a role for technology, and there's a reason for individualization and connections. And I think you can marry the two up. I've got organizations that talk to their employees all the time over texting. Just I text you this, I text you that, I ask you a question. And texting is becoming a norm in our communication patterns that we've got to adapt to. Mm-hmm. And the younger our workforce gets, the more they're going to expect this. And just like when Phil was saying, why not let them, pick their own shifts? And I think you can use technology for that. So I think that there's a way to foster individualization and customization with technology. But at the end of the day, in the hospitality business, it's still people taking care of people. And so you got to also talk to people on a regular basis. How you doing? Everything okay? Good to see you. Thank you very much. Little things like that. And that'll maintain the connection. But look, we all have nieces and nephews who now have kids who are in this Gen Z world. And I got to tell you, these kids are going to revolutionize the world. And we used to say that every generation revolutionizes it, but because they're natives to technology, and they're going to change things that we're not even thinking about yet. So I think you got to figure out good uses of technology and communication and personalization.
Agreed.
And on the good use of technology, just it's interesting. I think coming out of this, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to stop using virtual meetings. So we've had to do it for so long, but there's ways to still use this, what is actually quite an incredible platform of virtual meetings or Zooms or Microsoft, well, any whatever the platform is, the video platform, where we've seen this within actually Marriott with all the global sales teams that have been, of course, around the world for forever. But in the last year, we started instilling Mindful Mondays, and it was truly just this 15-minute time where the teams would come together from all over the world. And I would actually do 2 sessions so we could get everybody from EMEA and all different parts of the world. But it really was this incredible visual of the technology that we are all very used to now, but a way to bring everybody together. And I just think of, people coming back into the office or back into some type of hopefully in-person working environment. We can still use these virtual technology tools, but in a way that can really vamp up our connection and our personal, mental, physical well-being. So I think the hybrid model will be a great way to start doing some of that.
We can have a whole nother session on just that. So I'm going to ask one final question of each of you. This is going to run out of our time. It just, as expected, flew by. What's been the single biggest personal lesson that you've experienced or learned over the last couple of years, and what you're bringing forward in this next chapter as we reemerge into the world, so to speak?
I can tell you, I think for me, and I was doing a little bit of thinking on this topic when I first got the invite to participate today, and my thought, with the whole Rebels sort of series, the new rules of leadership, my thought was, what are the old rules? Maybe if I can sort those out and get those clear, then it'll become apparent what I'd like to talk about today. But I think the old rules are still the new rules. Show up, do the right thing, get better. It's just a matter of how we do it, how we talk about it, and finding perhaps the courage and encouraging that in our team to go ahead and make the extra effort to get it done well, and not getting sidetracked with some of these other complicated, necessary, noisy things that are out there right now.
Yeah, and be flexible.
Yeah, capital F.
In 2003, when I opened Wynn Las Vegas, we were, believe it or not, we were the first people to take applications for hourly employees online. And everybody said to me, these hourly employees aren't going to be able to do that. What are you talking about? And, maids and dishwashers and bellmen, no, they walk in, they want to fill out a pay. And I said the world is changing. And what I learned then, because we had 125,000 applications in 30 days online, I learned that people are adaptable. If you communicate well to them effectively, if you listen to their concerns and react to them, and you show that you care. And we were shocked that we were the first and it worked. And we went on to do other technological things. And so I learned a little bit about technology, but I also learned about the resilience of human beings. And that same topic has certainly come back in multiple ways these past 2 years. People's resilience.
Yeah.
If you're open and honest and trusting and caring and listening, they'll show up. But if you're not, you're yesterday's news and you'll never see them again.
Well said, Marty.
Yeah. And I would just note it, and I know we're running out of time, just really quick. I would further that comment on resilience and adaptability. From a personal standpoint, I lost about 95% of my business at the beginning of COVID. And I think many people did. And I think it was just this opportunity what I did was really tap into as many people as I learned from in the years leading up to that, and just start to recreate my business, reinvent essentially what that could look like. And it reminded me of how many people in our circle we can learn from, and then how quickly we can actually adapt to the circumstance, and then actually maybe come up with something even better. So it's a really positive, I think, within a lot of the negative in the last 2 years, I think there's a lot of positive that can come within business and just with that reconnection with each other.
Yeah.
And as the oldest guy here, I can tell you, old dogs can learn new tricks.
Well said. Rebels with a heart, as we say. So, and with that, I just want to reiterate my appreciation for each of you, for all of you, for our audience. There's a very active, engaged audience today. Thank you for all your questions, comments, ideas, feedback. This was a fun one. As always, it just flies right by. We look forward to connecting with all of you. Thank you again to you, Nora, to Arte, and Phil for joining us as our guests today, and for being exemplars of caring leadership and servant leadership and putting people first at the heart of business. So with that, have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. We'll see you on the next segment.
Thank you.
Thank you.